we should be starting in a few minutes. Resetting the mic, so.
Four.
You are set then.
We're good. Well, I think we should go ahead and get going, and hopefully Melinda will be able to join us.
Yes, and did April tell you that unfortunately Gina can't attend today, so Gina can't attend today, so.
Yes,
Okay.
I know Gina.
Okay.
Sorry. So, first of all, I'd like to call the meeting to order and maybe go around and do introductions. Jim Whaley, Chair.
I'm Debbie Lane.
Jacob Krasovich.
Ann Pichette, Housing Coordinator for the city.
David Kanopke, the Transportation Systems Director.
Ellie Ray, City Planner.
Online.
Jeannie Bernard, I work for St. Peter's Health.
Janae.
Jeannie?
Jeannie.
Yourself.
I think Jeannie, are you trying to speak?
Yep,
Unmute.
I'm unmuted.
Right. Just a minute here.
Okay.
No, she's not muted. She's trying to speak. Jeannie?
Yes.
So it went through, but okay, Jeannie's here. She can hear us.
Yes, I can.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Okay. So the first order of business is discussion on the. Has anybody got any comments to make on the meeting minutes? Did anybody read the meeting minutes?
I read them last night.
I did as well.
Okay, do I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes?
I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The next issue is any ADA complaints or concerns that the city is aware of?
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. We have not received any concerns or complaints with the grievance process. I did want to note, though, that I believe it was last week, we received an email from Vice Chair Lytle, and Gina had expressed some concern about the angled parking spaces and the access aisle and ramp onto the sidewalk in front of the job service building. So was able to reach out ultimately to folks at the state, and John Paveo still with the Department of Administration, and he said that, you know, they are aware of the issue. They'll be sure to take care of it and be more vigilant about it, and that in the future, if Director Kanopke's crew or anybody else sees issues with leased or owned properties.
So what is the issue?
There was snow and ice that had accumulated. I'm sorry, I should have clarified. But Gina had thought it was a city issue. It is not a city issue. It is a maintenance issue on their part. But again,
Being the building owner or?
yes, the state of Montana who manages the snow removal of those ADA spaces. So there was just a little bit, and obviously I walked it last week just to check to see how things were on Front Street, and it was after things had heaped up enough that it was completely clear of snow and ice, and there was no debris, no gravel or anything in the ramp. It was all clear. So in the future, if we have issues arise surrounding state properties, we know that we can reach out to John Paveo directly, and he will direct it to the appropriate agency, ADA coordinator as needed. In that case, it was Department of Labor, so it went to their HR director, Randy McKay. So that is that.
So my understanding of that is there is a on-street parking spot that is ADA. But even though that has a sign, there's it doesn't meet ADA standards because there's a cross slope. I mean, the natural cross slope of the street doesn't meet ADA standards.
I think, Dave, do you want to speak to the improvements that were done on Front Street? Does that remain the case in front of that building, to your knowledge?
They should have met it because they were it was designed to have the handicap ramp or the handicap parking space.
Right.
We can go out and take a look and see.
But I think that, I mean, that's a challenge in a lot of streets in Helena, is where you have a street that goes down a slope that's greater than the cross slope allowed for a ramp. But I believe there is also an ADA parking space in their parking lot immediately north.
Yeah, there's additional
Sorry.
parking. That's specifically for the building.
Correct.
And it might be worth clarifying too, and you can add on to what I'm about to say if needed, David, but the angled parking spaces around the city are not maintained by the city as far as
Yeah.
snow removal is concerned.
Our trucks can't get into, I mean, we can plow parallel parking spaces because it's just an additional as we move over, but typically angled parking has medians and parked vehicles from time to time, and our trucks can't make that turn in and actually plow the initial space or two. And then we have to pull out of that parking if we were to plow something like that a space or two before, because our trucks just aren't that maneuverable. And most of the areas we have in the recent past, we've been working with property owners and getting a maintenance agreement that's there, so they're fully aware that they're in charge of the maintenance stuff like that along angled parking, because angled parking is technically a variance request by the adjacent property owner to have. It's not it's something that has to be considered by the commission, and one of the considerations is the additional maintenance that we just can't do because of the size of our vehicles. So.
Sorry to steal your thunder, David, if that was a topic of discussion
Nope.
under item C. A.
So that was it for the, any concerns?
Yeah, yes.
So, update on the enforcements, Ellie?
Yeah, so there is no update, new update.
Give an
Any
update?
different than January, pardon?
Want me to give that update?
Oh, if you might be privy to other things, David, that I am not, so please feel free, go for it.
So the enforcement recommendation is, so when this started off, it did come from the ADA, and we initially looked at it from an ADA perspective. But when we started to go through and say, and look and say, this is an ADA violation, this is an ADA violation, this is an ADA violation, we weren't gonna name them all, we were gonna miss something. And so when we took a step back, we looked at it as a overall enforcement of code for the city. So what is currently being worked on, proposed, however you want to look at that, is a process so that it's repeatable every time. So, you know, whether that's they get a courtesy warning and a written warning and a second written warning, or whatever that process is, that'll be the same for the majority of code violations across the city. And then as we get into areas like sidewalks or obstructions or whatever that specific section of code, it's already in there on some of them, but typically the last item in that code section that says, you know, something to the effect of any violation of the above section of code will entail $25 fine, blah, 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 whatever. So that's where the two are going to kind of merge, diverge, however you want to look at that, where we'll have a general process for those code violations. We'll have a single point of contact for those code violations, and not just ADA, but code in general. And then those will be looked at by code enforcement or the applicable agency or division, see how they apply, if they truly are a violation or not, documentation, and then whatever action is outlined for that section of code, the appropriate steps will be taken. So we're still working on some language, but that should be, you know, hopefully taken care of in the next few weeks so that we can potentially have a draft of that sometime, you know, early summer in front of the commission to consider.
So then it'll go to the city council, and we'll vote on that.
The city commission for any code changes, yes.
So potentially fall or something. That will,
Well, we're hoping to take that draft, you know, sometime in the near future. You know, we're in the midst of budget season, so we just have to see where we can fit that in after we get the language worked out. And there's a number of departments to work with to make sure that we're hitting everything so we can do more of a consistent enforcement basis and then revising those specific code sections.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding the?
So question for you, David. So just to make sure I understand the timeline correctly, so you're expecting sometime in the next several weeks to have the draft done, and then sometime come, you know, end of summer, beginning of fall, maybe get it before the commissioners to vote on, depending on the timeline of the
So-
budget and such.
Depending on what comment so typically for these, we, excuse me, take proposed changes to the commission in an admin meeting, so we can have kind of a discussion about them, and if there's changes, then we can take them back. But if there's no real, or there's not that many changes or not that many comments, then typically that next commission meeting or someone coming right up after that, we bring it up for their consideration and then move on from there. So, you know, depending on comments, depending on, you know, any other, you know, input, public input, may shorten or lengthen out that timeline just to make sure that we have the language correct that everybody's anticipating.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Jim?
Certainly.
With the admin meetings, forgive my ignorance, I'm new to the city of Helena process. I'm used to the state and national level. Are those admin meetings strictly an internal?
No.
They're open to the public?
They're a public meeting.
Okay.
It's more of a work session.
Okay.
So there's a little bit more back and forth between, you know, staff and the commission and you know, they take public comment after each item.
Okay.
And then the commission, the regular commission meetings on Monday nights is when official action takes place. So,
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you. David, you wanna jump into your presentation of the transportation systems and what you've
sure.
been doing and are anticipating doing?
So snow policy removal, refresher. So if you're basically in a commercial B2, B3 zone, you have a certain amount, it kind of varies depending on when the snow starts and falls, but you have a certain time of frame to remove your snow in front of your business. And it is expected to be removed basically towards the end of the day. Residential, there's a kind of a misnomer there. It doesn't specifically, it says residential, it just says all areas in the city will, the snow is expected to be removed within that first 24 hours. So that's sidewalks. As far as plowing of the streets, depending on the amount of snow that falls, will depend on how we approach our operations. If it's, you know, a matter of 2 to 4 inches, then the guys, you know, plow as much as they can. If it's a heavy snowfall, then their initial passes are to open up the roadway so that we can get emergency vehicles. That may mean we come back at a later date to basically curb it. And curbing kind of has two definitions. If there's boulevard sidewalks, then it will be curb face to curb face, and that snow will be placed on that boulevard as much as possible. If it's curbside sidewalk, then the snow is bermed up 2 to 3 feet away from the curb so that that snow doesn't go onto the sidewalks. You know, I do recognize, and so does the city, that our plowing creates berms across driveways, across ADA ramps that make it difficult depending on the amount of snow. We really don't have a means to not burn people in unless we only have 2 pieces of equipment that have snow gates, and that's the motor graders. And typically they run at a lot slower speed. And we use those after we get the roadways opened up for not only emergency traffic, but people getting to and from work. And if there's complaints on sidewalks or whatever, you know, the easiest way is to go to the My Helena app and submit a service request in there. And then our code enforcement folks go out and look at it. If there is a violation, then they leave you a notice and then they come back to make sure it's been taken care of. If it's not, after they go through their procedures, they may have to remove the snow themselves. And if they do, then they track their time, materials, and then they send an invoice to the property owner for them to pay that invoice. Property owners can appeal the bill to the city. If not, if they don't pay it and we don't hear from them, then at one of our kind of last pieces of the budget, it gets placed upon their taxes to be paid. So that's kind of a quick, other than adjacent property owners are responsible for the snow removal and maintenance of the sidewalks adjacent to their homes or businesses. That does include the ADA ramps. Other than that, I will stop my quick summary and see if there's any questions that I can answer.
Just one comment, and I appreciate the dilemma. I don't offer any solutions, but when you have a ADA ramp going into a street, the homeowner is responsible for the ramp, which they do, but then there's a berm right at the end of it. It really does not do the ADA person or the disabled person any benefit of having the ramp cleared, but the berm. I mean, I understand the issue of certainly as we put a lot more ramps in around the city, that exacerbates your problems. But I do see that as a concern if we want to be fully accessible in the winter.
Yeah. So there's two kind of methods that you can plow. You can plow to the right, which we do. Some cities plow to the center. Right. That still comes with a host of issues. ADA crosswalks can still be partially or fully blocked by those snow berms in the middle. And then once it starts melting, all that snow is at the crown of the road and then melts down to the edges of the road. So then if it freezes at night, it becomes slick. So we're still exploring ways to try to mitigate this. We have looked into, like I said, we have snow gates on our motor graders, but that's a lot slower process to use throughout the city. Typically, we use those along emergency snow routes. It's just a lot slower process, and we only have two of those. One is basically 2-wheel drive, and the other one is so that the second one is if it's slick out at all, it stays back because it doesn't. It just doesn't have
the reality is that I won't say all because I certainly know some people in wheelchairs that but for the most part, people with wheelchairs use vehicles to maneuver around. And then the biggest concern is where there's places of business or where there's consolidation. And certainly if the city could understand where people with individuals, certainly the hospitals, medical facilities, retail facilities, those places that it's the priority for them to get to. If we could focus our efforts on that, I think that would be a benefit.
Sure.
May I ask a question, Chair?
Mm-hmm.
David, I'm largely collecting information at this point because I don't want to just throw out stupid suggestions, but because I know certainly from my own perspective, driveways are, that's unfortunate, but to me that's kind of part of living in Montana, and you can shovel the berm and it's a bummer, but the crosswalks are a primary concern for myself, and I know for other people within the disabled community. So along those lines, I have a couple questions. One being, again, forgive my ignorance. What are snow gates? And then also, you talked about how other cities do push to the middle, which I mean that also causes other problems, like you said. Are there any cities that are a good example of clearing strictly the wheelchair, the curb cuts for the wheelchairs there?
So a snow gate. So as you have the mow board on a motor grader,
Mhm.
it's a piece that comes down and kind of does this, karate chop action.
Okay.
So it's kind of a gate. So as a motor grader either is doing snow or dirt,
Mhm.
the material windrows off to, and then creates a windrow along where they're grading.
Oh, okay.
So with a snow gate, if it comes up to a driveway or an ADA ramp, the snow gate comes down and carries that snow
Mhm.
to a certain extent.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't eliminate the berm, it minimizes the berm, but there's still a berm because it can't, depending on, I mean, most of it is just like anything with snow plowing. There's a lot of variables on, composition of the snow, whether it's dry or it's wet. What was the depth of the snow? If we're running your maybe an average 2-3 inches of snowfall, then it does a little bit better job. But if we're pushing, a foot of snow, like we had some pretty significant snowfalls this year, then that gate is only so big and it fills up relatively quickly. So as far as cities that are doing, better, I don't know any per se. But it boils down to, I mean, I take that back. I can't remember. There's a YouTube video up in Ottawa or some city in Canada showing their snow removal in a neighborhood. And yes, they had equipment that was going down along the sidewalks. They had equipment that was, as a supervisor, making me cringe that the operators were getting so close to the parked cars. All I could see was, claims being filed. But they had a very efficient way of removing the snow. Not completely because there was parked cars, but the majority is snow. But that was probably 8 pieces of equipment, which needs that many operators. And that, I can't remember how long the video took, but that was for a block. It's impressive. But to do a level of plowing or removal would take additional resources to bring to bear. And so it's not out of the question. It's just what level does the city want to be at as far as removing snow? Because there's even just the plowing of the streets. We could, a lot of cities are implementing a liquid program, and that's liquid mag chloride, or they are doing even a beet juice thing, so everything is red. So I guess it's good that you know where you've sprayed and where you haven't sprayed.
Yeah.
But it just helps melt the snow faster.
Yeah.
But those are only applicable in certain temperature ranges, and if you fall below this side, then it doesn't melt. It actually it gets slicker. So you have to be very cognizant of when and how you're applying that stuff. So, there's a lot to consider, but again, it's the level of service, I guess, and expectations that are out there right now. We go curb to curb if we can, but our primary goal is to make sure that there's initially there's plowed streets for emergency vehicles or for the person driving to get to and fro to their destination facilities, and then everything else, the parking spaces and everything, is something that we come back and do later. And then if we're having continuous snowfall, then that kind of just compounds the thing. We used to have in the policy that if 2 inches of snowfall, so when I started and revised the snow routes, there was 50 miles of snow routes in Helena. And there was a policy that said, if there's 2 inches of snowfall after you've plowed a snow route, you have to go back and plow it again. So obviously, if it's snowing that much, nobody's getting anything done because they're basically chasing their tail. So we changed that from 50 to 10 miles of snow routes roughly, and then did priority routes so that they could open up those emergency snow routes, and then they could hit those priorities. And that has helped, not with the berms, but with just the efficiency of the staff getting out there and opening up the.
Thank you.
And my understanding, the problem with mag chloride is that it exacerbates the rusting of the rebar and deterioration of your concrete, so.
And the vehicles.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily
It's not a cure-all, no, by all means, no. We're one of the few cities that still use winter sand. And you know, we pick up our winter sand, as Elliot mentioned, we're out sweeping right now. And depending on the year, depending on the fall, I know it seems weird that it depends on the fall and how many leaves we got picked up, but if we had an early snowfall after all the leaves had fallen and we didn't have all the leaves picked up, then those areas, when we go back and sweep, have too many organics in it, and we have to basically dispose of that sand. We can't separate that out. If we've had, you know, where we got all the leaves and we're not getting a lot of organics, we recycle that sand upwards of 4 to 5 years. And so that helps keep our costs down during the winter as well.
So when it comes to the clearing the curb cuts, it's to me it sounds like the snow gates clearly aren't the option. One, because of speed, but two, realistically, I won't speak for other parts of the disabled community, but for the blind and visually impaired, I mean, 2 or 3 inches of a snow berms. We can steal from my community. It is when you have these foot tall ones, and those are the things the snow gates can't do well. So it sounds like we don't quite have a solution yet for it.
Well, they can. It's just whenever that arm goes down to start carrying the snow, if you've had a lot of snowfall, then the arm is only like 24, 30 inches long.
Yeah.
And it's about 18 inches tall. So depending on how much snow they're pushing, that area fills up.
Yeah.
And if we have more snow out there, then it fills up faster, and then the snow berm, basically falls off and creates a little bit more. If we have a lesser amount of snow, then it carries more of that snow around the corner or around across the driveway.
And am I correct that you do have some people like on 4-wheelers with plows or something that cleared the downtown area, or?
The ADA ramps are the adjacent property owner's responsibility. Anything else on snow?
I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
And I will say thank you. What I know a lot of us that I've talked to will be excited that the city has made movement on the code enforcement aspect. So one gentleman that's not here today, I know is going to be super excited. So.
Yep. So the City and Adapt software introduction, that's what's up on the right-hand screen. And basically this dashboard just tells us total assets of 13,147, and total assets with attribute data is 12,922. So that's different because some of the assets, some of the data didn't come through. Some of the assets are still going through QA/QC to ensure that the data is correct.
Explain what we mean by assets really quickly.
So assets can be anything from a sidewalk, curb ramp, crosswalk, pedestrian signal, bike lane. And it's a little misleading because sidewalks, we don't have them broken down by just the frontage of each property. So if the entire block is ADA compliant, then the entire block is one asset that is in green. If there's pieces and parts that are non-compliant, then those pieces and parts are non-compliant, and the other pieces are compliant. So we're working with the software because it was never developed just to do adjacent, but we feel that having that adjacent property, parcel data would be more helpful for the average person so that they could, potentially look at their parcel and say, oh, my sidewalk's good, or, oh, darn, my sidewalk's bad, type thing, instead of seeing this whole. So there, we have other dashboards, and again, we're still in the process of this, so none of these numbers are 100% accurate. But they'll give you a good overview. So we have a compliance overview. And our compliance just breaks down total pedestrian assets with data, which are sidewalks, curb ramp, crosswalks, ped crossings. We have 12,922. Compliant assets, 4,359%, compliant, 33.7. And cost to compliance is 21,653,126. So that seems very poor. In reality, if you're just looking at it, yes, it is. But a lot of these assets, the cross slope, maximum cross slope is 2.1. Our LiDAR data may have read it at 2.2. And this is where we're going through the QA/QC with the consultant, because like Rodney, originally when we first got the first flow of this, a lot of those ADA ramps were non-compliant, and we're like, I just spent good money for compliant ramps, and we have documentation that shows that they were. So we went back out and took some data just to verify. So what we found was the LiDAR data is actually too good. Because if there's, so it takes, I don't know how many, but it can take hundreds of cross slope calculations because it has that many points. But if one of those crosswalks, it happens to fall on top of a pebble that's out there, and it puts it at 2.2, then the whole ramp is out of compliance. So we had to go back, and that's why this has taken a lot longer, is the consultant has also had to go back and QA/QC all these ramps so that they were reporting what they were supposed to. So in a lot of these, so they collected this data in October, I believe it was. We'd already had, there was, some wash down. And so if there was a little bit of gravel on the sidewalk or in the ramp, then it considered it damaged, because it couldn't distinguish between gravel versus, a damaged ramp. So again, another thing that the consultant has gone through ramp by ramp and is continuing to do that to make sure that we have a very accurate picture of what we have. Again, not to say that 33% is good, it's not, but there is a percentage there that is very close to compliance, or it may be compliant. We're just doing field verifications on that.
And one comment, I mean, I know this is beating up on architects and engineers and the entire profession, but architects tend to say, for example, if a ramp is 1 in 12, they'll specify that 1 in 12. If you design it, if you specify it 1 in 14, if you give yourself some tolerances, when you're specifying right at your minimums or maximums, then you have those issues. But if you can put it into your design standards wherever feasible, I mean, sometimes you want to, shorten that ramp as much as you can, and you don't want to stretch it out.
Yeah, so our proposed engineering revisions for ramps doesn't, it says that 2% is,
Right.
is the maximum.
Right.
But we have a desirable grade that the city is saying of, 1.75.
Right.
So just for that reason, that if you set the forms exactly at 2% and somebody happens to step on it or drops a shovel on it and, it knocks it out of whack, or when they broom finish it, they press down a little bit too hard at the top of the ramp and they lift at the bottom, then that throws that whole thing out of compliance. So we have those proposed in the engineering standards revisions so that there is a little bit of wiggle room. Yeah, so don't disagree with you. So this just shows a little heat map of where the non-compliance areas are. And it's not a surprise, it's the older part of town. I mean, that's typically what you see in every city. The older parts of town typically, have a lot of needs because they were, they started off horse and buggy, and then they went to wooden boardwalks, and then we had vaults for coal, fire, there's a myriad of reasons why. But that's what we're seeing. Pedestrian network gaps. So right now, there's a total gap, depending on sidewalk gaps, missing crosswalks, or missing curb ramps. That's a total of $30 million in round figures. So overall, there's about $50 million worth of work to be done in the city to bring us into 100% compliance. Again, so back on, sorry. So we can go into this asset query, asset map. So we can query against any of the asset attributes, cross slopes, whether they're compliant or not, what have you. This map brings up, basically, you come over here to your data toggles, and right now it defaults on pedestrian network assets are on, bicycle network assets are on, and roadway networks assets are on. And then there's a legend over here, and there's a priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a green category for compliance. So the priority legend there is not to discount ADA compliance, but it's there to give a guidance, so kind of worst first type thing, so that you can see how much really bad stuff you have and how much really stuff that's really close. Right now, it's at the default percentages that the consultant group put in, but we're going to tweak it as soon as we get to the point of some of the changes that they're making in the background. Sometimes that resets the rules, and we did some of the rules, and then they reset, and we're just like, okay, we're going to wait until we're at basically a point that we don't have to keep going back and checking that our rules are staying there. So we're going to adjust those priorities so that we can see, some of the biggest barriers. Obviously, one is no curb ramp at all, whether that's, and that would be no curb ramp, but they have sidewalks. So that's a barrier. If you don't have sidewalks and no curb ramp, then it's still a barrier, but there's not a pedestrian facility that you would expect people to be using. So we're going to tweak the rules so those priorities will change a little bit, or the percentages, excuse me, and you'll see those change. So I'm just going to show you a quick asset. We can go down here to Front Street. And according to our LiDAR data, that sidewalk that runs from Neal to 13th in front of the job service, that sidewalk is 100% compliant. Now, I do know, and now that we brought it up, that there's a ramp there to the pedestrian that got missed. So we'll have to have them pull that out and add that. But for something that may not be compliant, you can go into these individual assets, and this lag time that you're seeing once it goes live won't be a lag time, because it'll be live data versus it's going back and checking, and they might be running updates in the background, so it's trying to pull data out. So once it goes live, it will be a lot better. So you can go in. This is kind of just the asset compliance data page. The first tab is just kind of a summary, and it says ADA actions: replace curb ramp with a perpendicular ramp, resize ramp, turning space. You can go into the next tab over, which is the asset information, and it gives you, the cross slope is 1.3, the curb ramp is perpendicular, detectable warning, surface damage, no. Gutter slope is 3.5. So here's another one where we will have to go out and verify, or they're gonna verify that the main width is 47.3 inches. Well, the minimum is 48 inches. So did the LiDAR miss something, or was there, again, if one piece of it is out of compliance, the whole piece is out of compliance. It doesn't differentiate that, there could have been some grass growing over onto the ramp, and it changed that 3/4 of an inch. So if it's very black and white when it looks at this, it's either compliant or not. And that's a good thing, and in this case, it might be a bad thing, because it could have been just some grass over them when we have a quote unquote non-compliant ramp that's actually compliant. And then it says here, the turning space cross slopes 2%, 2.2%. Again, compliance is 2.1%. Was that a pebble that it picked up, or is it truly 2.2% cross slope? Something that we have to go and check. So that's the, you can go to the non-compliance elements, and it basically gives you the same information down here. It has a photos tab that we can upload photos, or they have photos. So it gives you the photo of the exact piece of, or the exact asset that you're looking at. Plans. So a plan in here is, we can pick a corridor and all the assets that we want to upgrade, and it will actually put together a plan with each ramp, each asset, and what needs to be done, where it needs to be done, and a cost. Along with these photos and documents. So if we go in and we fix something, we can go and update the asset information, and then we could attach the documents. There might be a technical and feasibility form. There might be, additional certification. We can attach that, and all the history of that asset from when we started this program it will be housed within this program. So you can see, somebody 20 years from now could go in and click on this asset and see everything that's been done with that asset over the years. Hopefully, hopefully it's compliant. If we have it non-compliant, then we fix it and it's compliant again. Somebody can go back and look at that. And that's the plan with this, is that everything will be documented within ADAPT. And that's why we pushed this. So they were an ADA compliant sidewalks, ADA ramps and signs and stuff only software. And we basically pushed them and talked to them and for over about 3-4 months, and got them to be our asset management system for the city's transportation department. So not only do we have the ADA and the sidewalks, we also have all our signs now will be in here, all our pavement markings, all our street data. And this data that was taken is at such precise measurements that we can extract the topographic features of the road and actually use those as design. It's that close. And then, so everything's going to be housed here. What they don't do well, and we're still working with them to help them make the software better, is facilities. So like our parking structures. We have an ADA transition plan for our parking structures, but they don't do facilities well, and we're working on that. The other nice thing is we can give contractors access to the compliance aspect of this. So they can go out, it tells them, lay your level down here, lay the level, put in the reading, and it walks them through step by step, whatever type of asset they're doing. And at the end of that, they would say green, compliant, or these are the pieces that are non-compliant. And they can fix those before we come out there, so that when we come out to inspect, they have a compliant asset. So it's actually really good for our folks too. When they're out there, it's all very structured and delivered, so that all that information is within the program itself. And I'll stop there because I could talk for a lot longer, but there's other things going on.
Okay.
So once you go live, will that be on the Helena website?
It will, the amount of information probably won't be on there. And the access to the information, won't be obviously there, but there will be a public facing web dashboard so people can use it and see what's out there.
And how often do you do your readings? Like, cause things settle and. things
So-
Change.
We wouldn't go back and resurvey this. We might come up with a plan that, it might be every 5 years. But in the interim, it would only be those areas that we're doing work or we receive complaints on that we would go out and measure. And then if something were to change, we would update the information. So if somebody tells us that they replaced their sidewalk in front of their house, we would come out, we'd measure it, and then we would take either a missing sidewalk or a non-compliant sidewalk, edit it, and put that information in.
Did people tell you that?
No,
Cause I redid my sidewalk. I didn't know I had to tell anyone.
no. So this is every sidewalk ramp and everything was collected as of October last of 2023. So we have a snapshot in time of what was there. Basically, that's our starting point.
Impressive, very impressive.
David, do you want to talk about how this dovetails at all with the sidewalk summits that have occurred to date?
Sure. So we as everyone may be aware that we had some sidewalk summits previously. And, the hardest part of having that discussion of what to do with sidewalks in Helena is we didn't have an accurate inventory of what we had and what we didn't have. So that's when it was decided that we would go out and actually inventory and see what we had. So now we have what we know is non-compliant. What we have is, gaps. And then we can structure, some type of program that will hopefully, fix the non-compliant issues and start, filling in some of the gaps. But as you saw, it's about a $50 million project. That's not going to happen overnight. So there's still some work ahead of us, potentially to look at corridors or, one of the options that we proposed to the commission is start at the schools and work our way out, kind of safe routes to school type thing, because as you work your way out from the schools, they start to overlap pretty fast, and then the city gets covered pretty quickly in most areas, not in some areas, fall behind because of the locations of the schools, but yeah, it's going to be a tool to identify those areas that, we want to target to make sure, it could be worse first, it could be, corridors. We're not there yet, but that's what now that we have this information and once we get it all QA'd, we'll schedule the next sidewalk summit to talk about next steps moving forward.
I feel like you've mentioned this before in a previous meeting, but this did include the walking mall.
No,
It did not include, okay.
they're working with us to get, so there's a backpack LiDAR system. And they're working with their the company that collected the data to see if they would rent us the backpack. And then we would get it, walk the walking mall. There was a couple other areas that didn't get done because they weren't on the adjacent to the streets or private, or like the areas in Carroll College didn't get done because it was a private area. But like the walking mall and some of the hiking trails and stuff like that, we wanted to kind of see if we couldn't get that backpack, collect that data, and then, just start filling in some of that missing information moving forward.
Thank you.
Current planned projects, so we don't have any real big projects in the next year or two. We moved into kind of maintenance mode, so you're going to see a lot more chip seals and a lot more mill and overlays from us in this summer and next summer. So we have our annual ADA ramp program that we use to get in front of our mill and overlay so that we can have the ramps compliant when we come through and do our mill and then the overlay portion, because that by DOJ ruling has to happen either concurrently or prior to the mill or overlay. And we've looked at it in the past and to try to coordinate a contractor to run that concurrently so that we're getting the ramps upgraded as the asphalt is being laid is just too much of a coordination effort. So we basically try to stay a year or so ahead of our mill and overlay program. So that's why you might see ADA ramps going in along the corridor. And then the next year or two, you'll see that mill and overlay come through and deal with the road structure. So we have a 6 ward project. It's a TA application. We have the environmental that we're submitting to MDT for their review. And then once they approve that, then we have, can't remember the number up, but roughly around $500,000-$600,000 to do ADA ramps in the 6th ward, which we denoted the 6th ward as Montana to the interstate and Prospect to basically the railroad tracks is kind of a generalized area that we're, and then we'll identify non-compliant ramps in there. We'll use that money to update as many ramps in that area as possible. And then we also submitted a SLIPA grant from SBE, Senate Bill 355, that has a match component for us, but that'll be another, depending on costs, could be another 40 or 50 ramps that we get either replace the non-compliant or get compliant ramps in where there's currently no ramps, but there's sidewalks leading to them. That's all really we have coming up. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
David, question for you. So the next ADA compliance committee meeting, unless something changes with the schedule, we're planning to have Brad Langsather come and talk about open lands. Since your request, Jim, had been to have directors come and just give updates on various goings on David's done today. Is there anything additionally that you'd want to talk about come July, or give an update about where the enforcement discussion at that point in time, or?
The enforcement and, I wouldn't have to go through a big long thing on the city, but I could let everybody know where we sit with the rollout of the live version of the city. So.
Okay. Thank you, David.
I thought we have any public comment because we don't have any public.
We do have Dr. G.
Okay.
Oh, I do have one more quick thing, and this is kind of some stuff, but David, is there information online? And I must confess, so city community development staff don't interface with the My Helena app. However, that is your preferred means of receiving
You're on there.
just sidewalk complaints. Pardon, what? Who?
You guys are on there for community.
We're on there, but we don't get notifications about, right of way
Mhm.
compliance issues. So, as far as use of that app is concerned, I understand that it's pretty intuitive, having not had a reason to use it myself. But is there any sort of training on the city website somewhere to say, hey, here's how you use this to submit complaints for any sidewalk issues if there's?
There was, I have to go out and look to see, but there was how to enter a service request. If not, folks can call the city streets division and the general line, and that usually puts you in touch with our administrative coordinator. And she'll actually, if you're having problems entering, she'll put it in for you and actually put in your email address as well so that you'll get those updates on that if you're having issues, and then she'll also walk you through the process if there's difficulties.
Wonderful, thank you, David. I know that would probably be beneficial, for example, for Vice Chair Lytle, since when I received emails from her late, they've usually dealt with those types of enforcement issues. So thank you for noting that on the record. Since she couldn't attend today.
So, Dr. G, did you, have any public comments?
Yes, thank you.
Just a
I
minute
would-
here. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I would like to offer sincere thanks, as usual, to Director Konopky for his very thorough updates and for the continued great efforts of him and his entire team. And he's always despite his very hectic schedule, he always takes time to answer inquiries that go directly to him. And that's very much appreciated. Also would like to thank Commissioner Reed for her efforts. And also just friendly offer to again extend my invitation to meet with Commissioner Reed at her convenience, as I have met with all other members of the City Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. G.
Thanks.
No other members of the public.
Okay. Do any of the committee members have anything that they want to add to the May 21st ADA hearing or meeting? I would say if you think of anything, you probably want to get them to Ellie by first of May.
Yes, technically they come from staff or through you. So just have them vetted. I'd ask them that they go through you first to be vetted in advance.
And I would look for a proposal to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
So moved. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, David.
Yep. Thanks, no problem. Thanks, Alan.
Oh, of course. Thank you.